Let me tell you something, kid. Life has a funny way of putting you on stage just when you'd rather hide in the shadows. It happened to me one blazing Saturday in Houston, Texas. The stadium was packed, the Astros facing the Yankees, and I was there in section 118, clutching a warm pretzel, never imagining my world would flip upside down in front of thousands. I'd just settled into my seat, enjoying the early summer breeze, when I saw my son, Ethan, making his way down the aisle. He looked every bit the successful executive, tailored suit, gleaming shoes, that self-important walk that used to make me proud, once upon a time. Ethan didn't visit much anymore. Since his mother, Linda, passed 3 years ago, our house in the quiet suburbs of Cyprus had grown too silent for his taste. He slid into the seat beside me, barely nodding hello. "Dad, you really came here alone?" His voice had that sharp, impatient edge I'd come to know too well. "Would have thought you'd at least spring for the club seats. You know, with your pension and all." I kept my face calm, fighting off the sting. "I like sitting with real fans," I told him, settling deeper into my faded Astros jacket, the one Linda had given me for my 60th birthday. He scanned the crowd, as if embarrassed to be seen with someone ordinary. "Couldn't you just hire someone to help you around the house?" he continued. "It's sad, honestly." I shrugged, trying to keep the peace. "I prefer doing things myself. Gives me purpose, you know?" But Ethan wasn't listening. He'd already pulled out his phone, scrolling through emails, looking for an exit from our awkward conversation. "You know, Dad, you live like someone who's just given up." His words hit harder than he knew. For a moment, all I saw was the little boy who used to ask me about baseball stats, the kid who cheered with me on this very field, back when a night at the ballpark was the best thing in the world. Now he barely looked at me. I asked him why he'd come so early. He didn't answer right away, just fidgeted in his expensive blazer. "Business people start early. That's how you get ahead," he finally muttered. He picked up the program from the seat back, sneering at the simple things that made me happy: my notes, the scorecard, my old ball cap. "You're like one of those guys who retire and disappear," he said, not even bothering to look at me. I took a slow breath. "That's not so bad. I worked my whole life. Helped you get through college, helped you launch your company. I earned a little peace." He laughed, cold and sharp. "Yeah? And that's the problem. You settled. You gave up on ambition, on making a real difference. What's left for you, Dad? Some dusty medals and an empty house?" He couldn't see the sacrifices, the long nights on construction sites, the missed meals, the little things that added up to everything. He just saw an old man in a cheap seat. The sun glinted off the field, and for a second I felt every one of my 67 years. But I squared my shoulders. "I gave you everything I had. My time. My savings. My love. I built a life for you to climb higher." Ethan snorted, setting his jaw. "You didn't give me enough. No connections, no big example to follow. You just worked. You let life pass you by." Those words, they felt like a slap. I glanced at the giant stadium screen just as the camera swept past our section. People were laughing, the crowd electric, but I felt suddenly invisible, as if my own son was erasing me. I leaned forward, my voice low and steady. "All I ever wanted was to see you become a good man. And I did my best, son. Maybe it's not the story you wanted, but it's ours." He glared at me, as if daring me to argue. "I wanted a father who showed me what greatness looked like. Not someone content to mow his own lawn and keep quiet in his old age." Something snapped inside me then, like a bat meeting a fastball. I wasn't going to sit there and let my own boy rewrite my story. "Ethan," I said, "you're not too old to remember who put you here, who fought for you. You don't get to call me a nobody." But the game was starting, and the stadium roared as the first pitch was thrown. Ethan sat back. arms crossed, eyes cold. I wondered if he'd ever see the real man behind the wrinkles and faded jersey. I didn't know it then, but that afternoon would change everything, for both of us. The innings rolled on, the Texas sun beating down, but the cold between Ethan and me could have frozen the field. I tried to focus on the game, the crack of the bat, the familiar smell of hot dogs and popcorn. But my mind kept replaying Ethan's words. You settled. You disappeared. I'd lived my life trying to be steady, a good man, a reliable father. When did that become something to be ashamed of? I risked a glance at Ethan. He was busy texting someone, frowning at his phone like it owed him money. The stadium was alive with cheers and music, but in our little corner, it was just tension and hurt. A father and son, sitting together but worlds apart. He broke the silence first. So what are you going to do now, Dad? Just drift through your golden years? You could be doing more. Volunteering, investing, something. You can't just vanish. I shrugged, my hands gripping the armrest. I help at the church, run the food pantry on Thursdays, keep up the Little League field. I'm not disappearing, son. I just don't measure my worth by how many zeros are in my bank account anymore. Ethan shook his head, almost in disbelief. You really don't get it. You worked your whole life just to end up, what? Alone in that old house, watching baseball reruns, waiting for the phone to ring? That's not a legacy, Dad. That's just existing. For a long moment I stared at the field, watching a father and his young daughter laughing in the row ahead. The little girl wore a bright pink cap, and her dad had his arm around her shoulders. I remembered when Ethan was that small, when he used to cling to me in crowds, begging for cotton candy and autographs. You know, Ethan, I finally said, my voice steady but sad. There was a time you wanted nothing more than to come to the ballpark with your old man. We'd share a hot dog, talk about the game. You used to say I was your hero. When did that change? He looked away, jaw tight. People grow up, Dad. The world changes. What worked for you back then isn't enough now. I sighed, feeling the weight of every disappointment between us. I guess I didn't realize loving you, working for you, wasn't enough. Just then, the Astros hit a home run and the crowd went wild. But Ethan barely glanced at the field. His mind was somewhere else, far away from me, far away from this life I'd built for us. The game moved on. We didn't say much. Ethan took calls, fired off emails, acting like every minute spent here was a minute wasted. By the seventh inning stretch, I was tired, not from the game, but from the ache of realizing I'd lost my boy to a world I didn't understand. He finally turned to me, frustration clear on his face. You know, Dad, you could have done more for me. Given me more opportunities, opened more doors. Instead, you just worked. You never networked, never built connections. I had to fight for everything. I kept my voice gentle, but there was steel under the words. I gave you my all, Ethan. You had a roof, food, a good school, and a father who showed up for every game and every recital. Maybe I didn't have a corner office or fancy friends, but I gave you what mattered. He sneered. Yeah, well, that's not enough in this world. The words stung, but I didn't show it. I just sat back, letting the sounds of the stadium wash over me. I thought about Linda, gone 3 years now, and wondered what she'd make of this. She'd always been the bridge between us, the one who could smooth Ethan's rough edges and bring out the best in me. After the final out, Ethan stood up fast, like he couldn't wait to leave. I have a dinner meeting, he said abruptly, so I'm heading out. Don't wait up. I watched him go, cutting through the crowd with that determined stride, never once looking back. The stadium emptied around me, fathers and sons laughing, sharing memories, building something I could barely remember having. I lingered in my seat, letting the noise fade. A few fans recognized me, old faces from the neighborhood. People who remembered when I coached Little League, when I fixed their porch steps for free, when Linda was still alive and our family felt whole. They nodded, offered a kind word, but I felt invisible, just another old man with nobody waiting for him at home. Walking to my truck, I replayed the afternoon in my mind. I wondered where it had all gone wrong. When had my son stopped seeing me as a hero and started seeing me as an anchor? The drive home was quiet, the Houston skyline glowing in the distance. I passed by our old church, the elementary school, the park where Ethan learned to ride his bike. Memories flickered like old film reels, too bright and too painful. When I got home, the house felt emptier than ever. Linda's picture smiled at me from the mantel. The old dog snored in the corner. I sat in my worn recliner, the one Ethan had mocked, and tried to make sense of it all. Was I really just a nobody? Had a lifetime of sacrifice and love been for nothing? I stared at the family photos on the wall. Ethan as a boy, Linda in her garden, the three of us on a fishing trip years ago. I wondered if Ethan would ever understand what I'd given up, what I'd built. Outside, the Texas night was settling in, warm and still. I poured myself a cup of coffee, turned on the porch light, and sat quietly, hoping the next day might bring something different. Maybe a call. Maybe a second chance. But deep down, I knew things wouldn't change. Not unless something shook Ethan out of his pride and made him see his father not as a nobody, but as the man who'd always loved him, no matter what. The next morning, the house felt colder, emptier. I wandered from room to room, the echo of Ethan's accusations lingering in the air. My hands found old tasks: folding laundry, fixing a squeaky door hinge, watering Linda's flowers in the backyard. But nothing could drown out the ache in my chest. I sat down at the kitchen table, Linda's favorite spot, and let my mind drift back over the years. All those long shifts, the busted knuckles, the promises I made to Linda and Ethan, that I'd give them a life better than mine, that I'd never let them down. But now, here I was, being called a nobody by the boy I'd once carried on my shoulders. I stared at the phone, half hoping it would ring. Maybe Ethan had cooled off. Maybe he'd called to apologize, to tell me he didn't mean what he said. But the house stayed silent, and the only voices were the memories rattling around in my head. By noon, I decided I couldn't sit still any longer. I grabbed my old cap and headed out, the Texas sun already baking the sidewalk. I drove to the community center, where I volunteered every Thursday. Mrs. Garcia was there, organizing canned goods for the food pantry. "Morning, Sam!" she called. I changed my main character's name from the original for the American flavor, Samuel, Sam, Cooper, in case you missed it. "Morning, Maria," I answered, forcing a smile. "Need a hand with those boxes?" She eyed me up and down, noticing the heaviness in my step. "You okay, Sam? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Just one of those days," I said, trying to sound lighter than I felt. We worked side by side for a while, sorting food, packing bags for families in need. Normally, this brought me peace, a sense of purpose. Today, my hands felt clumsy, my heart not in it. At lunch, I sat with the regulars, old friends from church, retired teachers, a couple of widowers like me. We talked about baseball, the heat, the price of gas. But when the conversation drifted to family, I felt myself shrinking inside. "Ethan been by lately?" Joe asked, stirring sugar into his coffee. I hesitated. "He's busy. Got his company, you know how it is." Joe grunted. "Kids these days. Always chasing something. My daughter called me last week to ask for money, didn't even ask how I was." The others chuckled, nodding in agreement. "That's the way of the world now, Sam," said Mr. Richards, the oldest of the group. "But you did good. You raised him right. He'll come around." I wished I believed that. After lunch, I stopped by the Little League field. The grass was overgrown, weeds sprouting along the base paths. I found the old push mower in the shed, fueled it up, and started cutting. The steady rhythm, the smell of fresh grass, It took me back to when Ethan was a boy, when he played shortstop for the Cypress Cardinals. Back then, I was the loudest dad in the stands, always cheering, always believing. I finished the field, wiped the sweat from my brow, and sat in the bleachers, staring out at the empty diamond. How did it all get so complicated? Where did I lose him? That evening, as dusk settled, I heard the familiar crunch of tires on the driveway. For a moment, my heart leapt. Ethan? But when I opened the door, it was my neighbor, Frank, carrying a six-pack of root beer. "Evening, Sam," he said, setting the bottles on the porch. "Mind if I sit a spell?" I nodded, grateful for the company. Frank lowered himself into the rocking chair beside me. We watched the sun slip behind the trees, the cicadas humming. "Heard you and Ethan were at the game yesterday," he said softly. I nodded. "Didn't end well." Frank let out a long sigh. "Kids, huh? They forget how hard it was for us. They see the results, not the work." I stared at my calloused hands, remembering years spent building houses, fixing cars, patching up scrapes and broken hearts. "He called me a nobody," I said quietly. Frank was silent for a long moment. "You're not a nobody, Sam. You're a damn good father. You gave him everything you could. Sometimes kids have to stumble on their own before they remember where they came from." We sat in companionable silence for a while. Frank cracked open a root beer, handed it to me. "Don't give up on him, Sam. He'll come around. They always do." But I wasn't so sure. That night I couldn't sleep. I wandered through the house, memories pressing in from every wall. Linda's laugh in the kitchen, Ethan's muddy cleats by the door, birthdays and holidays and ordinary days now gone. I found myself in my old study, flipping through a dusty photo album. There we were, the three of us, smiling, arms around each other at the Grand Canyon, on the porch with birthday cake, in front of the house I'd built with my own hands. Tears stung my eyes, but I let them come. I miss my wife. I miss my son. I miss the feeling of being enough. But deep down, a stubborn ember of pride started to glow. I'd survived harder times than this. I'd built a life out of nothing. Maybe Ethan didn't see it now, but I knew what I was worth. I set the album down, squared my shoulders, and made myself a promise. I wouldn't chase after my son's approval. I'd keep living, keep working, keep giving. I'd be ready if he ever decided to come back, but I wouldn't beg. As the clock struck midnight, I whispered to Linda's picture, "I hope you're proud of me, sweetheart. I did my best." And for the first time in days, I felt a small measure of peace settle over me. A few days passed in quiet routine. I woke before sunrise, made coffee just the way Linda liked it, and worked in the garden. My phone stayed stubbornly silent. Life went on. The ache in my chest dulled a little, but I still found myself glancing at the phone, hoping for a message from Ethan. Each evening, I'd sit on the porch, feeling the Texas heat ease, wondering if things could ever go back to how they were. Then, on Friday, Ethan showed up again, unexpected, no call, no warning. His Tesla rolled into the driveway, gleaming and silent, like it belonged in another world. He strode up the walk in a crisp suit, hairstyled just so, every inch the successful businessman. But there was tension in the way he carried himself, a restlessness I hadn't seen before. "Hey, Dad," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Can we talk?" My heart raced. Maybe this was it. Maybe he'd come to apologize, to make things right. I set aside the newspaper and motioned for him to sit. "Of course, son. What's on your mind?" Ethan sat on the edge of the couch, tapping his fingers against his phone. He didn't look at me. "I've got a situation with the business. A cash flow problem. Nothing major, but I need a loan. 50 grand, just to cover payroll until the next round of funding comes in. I'll pay you back." "Dad. You know I always do." My stomach sank. So this was why he'd come back. Not to rebuild our relationship, but to ask for money, again. I took a slow breath, steadying myself. Son, you know I'm retired. I live off my pension, my savings. I helped you with college, with your first apartment, with the business loan when the bank wouldn't touch you. But 50,000 is more than I have to give. Ethan's expression hardened. You always say that. But you must have something stashed away. You were always careful, always saving. You're just choosing not to help me. I shook my head. It's not about choosing, Ethan. It's about reality. I don't have what you need. He stood up, pacing the room, voice rising. You don't get it. If I don't get this money, I lose everything. The company goes under, the employees are out of work, and it's on you. I thought family was supposed to help family. I met his gaze, refusing to back down. I have always helped you. I gave you everything I had, every chance I could. But I can't give you what I don't have. He glared at me, eyes burning with a mixture of anger and desperation. Unbelievable. You'd rather sit here in this tiny house, clinging to your precious savings, than help your own son when it really matters. Ethan. I started, but he cut me off. You never aimed high enough, Dad. That's why you're stuck here, alone, counting pennies. I'm not going to end up like you. His words hit like a punch to the gut. All those years of sacrifice, of love, of late nights and double shifts, erased in a single, cruel sentence. Before I could answer, Ethan's phone buzzed. He grabbed it, his demeanor instantly shifting. I have to go. I've got a meeting downtown. Think about what I said. He was gone before I could reply, the screen door banging shut behind him. I stood in the silent house, hands trembling, his words echoing in my mind. Unbelievable. You'd rather sit here than help your own son. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation over and over. Was I a failure? Had I done enough? Linda's voice echoed in my memory. You did your best, Sam. That's all any man can do. By Saturday, the tension had settled in my bones. I needed air, needed distraction, so I drove into town to the bakery for coffee and a cinnamon roll. The place was buzzing with families, kids laughing, couples chatting, old-timers sharing stories. I sat by the window, lost in thought, when my old friend Frank walked in. He pulled up a chair and set his coffee down with a thump. You look like hell, Sam. I managed a weak smile. That obvious, huh? Frank leaned forward. Word around town is your boy's business is in trouble. People talk, Sam. I know it's not my place, but you don't know him what you can't give. I stared into my coffee, feeling the weight of Frank's words. He doesn't see it that way. Frank shook his head. Kids these days, they want everything yesterday. They forget what it took for us to build what little we have. We sat in silence for a while, watching the world go by. Frank clapped me on the back before he left. You're a good man, Sam. Don't let him make you doubt that. I drove home, heart heavy but a little steadier. Maybe Frank was right. Maybe I had to let Ethan face his own struggles. But the peace didn't last. The next day, Ethan called again. This time, his voice was all sugar and charm. Dad, listen, I've got an idea. How about we go to the Astros game this weekend? Just you and me. My treat. Let's make some new memories. The offer surprised me, but I wanted so badly for things to get better. I agreed, and for a moment, hope flickered in my chest. Maybe this was a turning point. Sunday came, and the stadium was buzzing. Ethan met me at the gate, tickets already in hand, great seats, right near the field. He acted warm, friendly, joking like he hadn't in years. For the first few innings, it felt almost like old times. But then, as the cameras panned the crowd, Ethan's mood shifted. He started checking his phone, barely watching the game. He ordered us both beers, raising his cup for a toast. To second chances? He said. A strange glint in his eye. And then, just as the camera zoomed in, the image appearing on the giant screen for everyone to see, Ethan leaned over, his voice cold. "You're nobody, Dad. You're just a sad old man." Before I could react, he threw the contents of his beer in my face. The stadium erupted in laughter. The camera lingered on my shocked, dripping face, and the crowd roared, some with cheers, most with cruel amusement. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I saw Ethan's sneer, heard the laughter echoing through the stands, felt the eyes of thousands burning holes through me. Every doubt, every fear, every moment of humiliation I'd swallowed in silence boiled to the surface. But something else was stirring, too, a spark of defiance, the old pride I'd nearly forgotten. Maybe I was just a nobody to Ethan. But I wasn't nobody to myself. Not anymore. As the laughter faded and the game resumed, I sat up a little straighter, beer still dripping down my shirt, and decided this wasn't the end of my story. The beer was cold, sticky, and humiliating. I sat in my seat, the liquid dripping from my hair onto my faded Astros shirt, soaking into my jeans. Around us, people laughed, pointed, some pulled out their phones to record. On the big screen above the field, my face filled the frame, stunned, wet, and suddenly very, very old. Ethan leaned close, his voice like ice. "That's what you get for never being there for me. Enjoy your 15 minutes, old man." He stood up, arms wide, soaking in the crowd's attention as if he were the hero. "Look at this guy," he shouted, loud enough for half the section to hear. "He's never done a thing with his life. And now he wants pity. Pathetic." The humiliation was unbearable. I saw people whispering, pointing, some shaking their heads, some snickering. My heart pounded with shame and anger. For a moment, I wanted to sink into the seat and disappear forever. The pain of my son's words hurt more than the laughter of strangers. But in the corner of my eye, I saw a group of players along the first base line, pausing their warm-ups to look up at the screen. One of them, tall, broad-shouldered, with a familiar walk, nudged his teammates, pointing right at me. Then, the strangest thing happened. The stadium's announcer's voice broke in over the PA system, cutting through the noise. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to take a moment to acknowledge a very special guest in our stands today." People turned, confused. The laughter faded, curiosity replacing mockery. "Section 118, Row 10, Seat 12. Please stand up, Mr. Sam Cooper." For a heartbeat, I didn't move. Ethan's mouth hung open in disbelief. But the crowd started clapping, some unsure, others just following along. "Please, Mr. Cooper," the announcer continued, "if you'd be so kind as to stand up." With trembling hands, I rose to my feet, beer still dripping down my face. The Jumbotron zoomed in again, but this time, the mood was different, quieter, almost respectful. "Many of you may not recognize the name Samuel Cooper," the announcer said, "but baseball fans in Houston, and across the country, owe this man more than you know." A murmur rippled through the stands. Ethan looked at me, confused and pale, his bravado melting away. "In the summer of 1977, the voice continued, Sam Cooper pitched the only no-hitter in Cypress High School history, leading his team to the state finals. He was drafted by the Houston Astros that same year, before an injury ended his professional career before it could begin. He turned down the big leagues to come home, care for his family, and coach hundreds of local kids, teaching them not just about baseball, but about character and perseverance." The camera flashed to several of the Astros' current players. A few were nodding, grinning, pointing in my direction. I recognized one of them, Jake Ramirez, the starting catcher, who'd played in the Cypress Little League under my coaching. He mouthed the words, "Coach Cooper," and raised his cap. People around me began to whisper, the atmosphere shifting. "Is that really him? Did you hear about the no-hitter? That's Coach Cooper. He coached my brother," the announcer went on. "This city owes a debt to men like Sam Cooper, who work quietly behind the scenes, shaping generations, building not just players but good people. Let's show our appreciation. Suddenly, the whole stadium was on its feet, clapping, some even cheering. I stood frozen, overcome with shock, tears burning in my eyes. For the first time in years, I felt seen, not as a washed-up nobody, but as someone who had made a difference, however quietly. Ethan's face had drained of all color. He sat, unmoving, unable to process what was happening. His father, the man he just ridiculed in front of thousands, was being honored as a local hero. Then, Jake Ramirez jogged over to the stands, a microphone in hand. Security moved aside for him as he climbed up to our row. "Coach," Jake said, loud enough for everyone in our section to hear, "I wouldn't be where I am without you. You taught me to never give up, to keep swinging no matter how many times life throws you a curveball. On behalf of the team, and the whole city, thank you." He reached out, shaking my hand. The crowd erupted again. The cameras flashed. I managed to find my voice, though it shook. "Thank you, Jake," I said, leaning into the mic. "I'm just proud to have watched you all grow, as players, as men. That's all any father or coach could ever ask." Jake nodded, his eyes shining, then turned to the crowd. "Let's hear it for Coach Cooper." The stadium responded, louder than before, thousands of people standing and applauding. Strangers slapped me on the back, some shook my hand, others wiped away tears. As Jake made his way back to the field, I sat down, overwhelmed. Ethan still stared at me, his eyes wide with disbelief, his ego shattered by the truth he'd never known. After a moment, he whispered, "Dad, I didn't know. Why didn't you ever tell me?" I looked at my son, seeing not just the man he'd become, but the lost little boy inside. "Because, Ethan, I didn't want you to measure yourself, or me, by trophies or applause. I wanted you to find your own path, your own worth. I wanted you to know that greatness isn't about fame. It's about how you treat people, what you give back." Ethan's shoulders slumped. "I'm sorry, Dad. I really am." The game resumed, but our world had changed. People stopped by to shake my hand, to thank me for what I'd done for their kids, their community, their team. The humiliation I'd felt just minutes earlier had been washed away by gratitude, by recognition, by the love of people who knew what truly mattered. For the rest of the game, Ethan sat beside me, quiet and thoughtful. As the final inning ended, he turned to me, his voice humble. "Dad, I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I hope you can give me another chance, to be the kind of son you deserve." I put my hand on his shoulder. "Son, it's never too late to do better. Life's full of second chances." The stadium lights glowed as we made our way out, father and son walking side by side, not as adversaries, but as family, finding our way back to each other at last. We left the stadium together, Ethan and I, walking into the warm Houston night. The lights of Minute Maid Park glowed behind us, the noise of the crowd fading into memory. For a long time, we walked in silence, the only sounds our footsteps echoing off the empty sidewalk and the distant hum of traffic. Ethan cleared his throat first. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I never realized, all those years you were coaching, giving your time, helping other people. I thought it was just a hobby. I didn't know you gave up your own dreams." I smiled, still tasting the emotion from the stadium. "Son, I didn't give up anything that mattered. Sure, I had my shot at the big leagues. But your mom needed me. You needed me. I chose family, and I never regretted it." He shook his head, shame on his face. "I was so blind. All I saw was what you didn't have. The house, the money, the things. I never thought about what you gave. I was too busy chasing my own success to see what you'd built." We stopped under a streetlight, the air heavy with the scent of summer flowers. For the first time in years, Ethan looked me in the eyes, really looked, not with disappointment or judgment, but with something like awe and respect. I heard you today, Dad, he said quietly. And not just with the beer. With everything I said, every time I treated you like you weren't enough. I don't know if I can ever make up for that. I squeezed his shoulder, feeling the roughness of his expensive jacket beneath my fingers. You don't have to make it up, son. But you can start by being honest, with yourself and with me. What's really going on? Ethan's shoulders slumped, the burden of pride finally slipping away. It's the business, Dad. I've been trying to keep up, to prove I could do it on my own. But I'm drowning. The company's in debt, payroll's late, and I keep telling myself the next deal will fix everything. But the truth is, I need help, not just money. I need advice, support. I need my dad. For a long moment, I just listened. I heard not just the adult Ethan, but the echoes of the little boy who used to ask me for help fixing his bike, who'd cry when he struck out at Little League, who only wanted his dad's reassurance that everything would be okay. I sat down on a bench outside the park entrance, motioning for Ethan to join me. Son, you have no idea how many nights I lay awake worrying about you. Not because of your failures, but because you stopped talking to me, stopped letting me in. Money problems come and go. Pride and love last a lot longer. He nodded, his voice thick. I thought asking for help made me weak. I thought if I acted successful, I'd be successful. But it just made me lonely and mean. I've pushed away the people who loved me most. I leaned back, staring up at the stars. You know what makes a real man, Ethan? It's not the size of your paycheck or the car you drive. It's being able to look your family in the eye and say, I need you. It's showing up, even when you're scared. Ethan's voice was barely a whisper. I was scared, Dad. Still am. I smiled, a little sadly. Me too, son. Life doesn't get less scary. But you don't have to do it alone. He wiped his eyes, a shaky laugh escaping. Here I am, a grown man, learning lessons I should have learned at 12. I laughed with him. We all learn at our own pace. Sometimes it takes a stadium full of people watching you act a fool to finally see yourself clearly. He looked at me, shame and hope fighting in his expression. Will you forgive me? There's nothing to forgive, son. But I do want you to promise me something. Anything. Next time you're in trouble, or scared, or just need to talk, call your old man. I may not have much money, but I've got a lifetime of hard-earned wisdom, and more love than you can ever spend. He nodded, swallowing hard. Deal. We sat for a while, letting the night settle around us. I felt lighter than I had in years, the weight of resentment and misunderstanding finally falling away. People passed by, some waving, some offering quiet words of respect. I wasn't invisible anymore. More importantly, either was Ethan, not to me. Eventually, Ethan stood up. Can I give you a ride home, Dad? I shook my head. I think I'll walk. It's not far. I want to let this night sink in. He hesitated, then reached out and hugged me, the way he used to when he was small, arms tight, heart open. I love you, Dad. I don't say it enough. I hugged him back. I love you too, son. Always have. Always will. He walked away, his silhouette disappearing into the city lights. I watched him go, pride and sorrow mixing in my chest, but also hope, real hope, for the first time in a long time. When I got home, the house felt different. Linda's picture smiled down at me, the rooms no longer empty but filled with the memory of the night. I poured myself a cup of tea, sat on the porch, and let the cool breeze wash over me. Tomorrow wouldn't be perfect. There would still be bills to pay, wounds to heal, trust to rebuild. But the wall between father and son was broken now. We'd begun to understand each other, not as rivals or disappointments, but as two men, imperfect, stubborn, but connected by something deeper than pride. Before I went to bed, I wrote Ethan a note and left it on the kitchen table for when he came by next. Son, greatness is not measured in applause, but in the lives we touch and the love we give. Don't ever forget that. Dad. As I turned off the lights and climbed into bed, I felt at peace. Not because my problems were gone, but because I had finally remembered who I was. And I knew, somehow, that Ethan was beginning to remember too. The next morning, sunlight spilled into my kitchen, warming the worn tiles and making the house feel alive again. For the first time in a long while, I woke up without that heavy ache in my chest. I made coffee, humming to myself, and watered Linda's roses on the porch. The world felt lighter. My phone buzzed, and I smiled as I saw Ethan's name flash across the screen. "Morning, Dad," he said, voice hopeful, almost shy. "I was wondering, do you have time for breakfast? There's something I'd like to talk about." "Of course, son. There's always time for you." We met at a little diner on Main Street, the same place where Linda and I used to go on Sunday mornings. Ethan looked different, less rushed, less guarded, a man who'd left some of his old armor behind. He even smiled as he slid into the booth. We ordered pancakes and coffee, and for a while, just enjoyed the easy comfort of being together. Ethan broke the silence first, stirring his coffee, eyes earnest. "Dad, I've been thinking. About everything. About the business, the mistakes I made, how I treated you. I want to make things right, not just between us, but in my own life." I listened as he talked, really talked, for the first time in years. He admitted to his failures and pride, to letting ambition blind him to what matters. He told me about his plans, scaling back, focusing on the people who counted, letting go of the need to impress strangers and start showing up for family. "I want you to be a part of it, Dad," he said quietly. "Not just for advice or help, but because I miss you. I need your example. I want to learn how to live for more than just myself." I felt tears prick my eyes, pride welling up like a tide. "Son, you're already doing it. You're making the changes that count. That's how men grow. That's how families heal." We finished breakfast and walked outside into the crisp air. Ethan stopped, turning to face me, hands in his pockets. "Do you think Mom would be proud of me now?" he asked softly. I put a hand on his shoulder. "Son, your mother always believed in second chances. She'd be proud of the man you're becoming, the man who can admit mistakes and make things right. That's all any of us can do." He nodded, blinking back emotion. "Thanks, Dad. For not giving up on me." We parted with a hug, and as he drove away, I felt a sense of contentment that had eluded me for years. The pain of old wounds still lingered, but new roots were taking hold, fresh hope growing where resentment used to be. Later that week, Ethan invited me to a meeting at his office, not as a silent investor, but as an advisor. I sat at the conference table, listening to him explain his plans to his team, watching him lead with more humility than I'd ever seen. When the meeting ended, he introduced me, not as just my dad, but as the man who taught me everything about character and perseverance. Afterward, we drove to the Little League field where I'd coached him so many years before. The sun was setting, golden light spilling over the empty diamond. Ethan tossed me a baseball, grinning. "Fancy a game of catch, old man?" I laughed, and for a moment, time rolled back. We played under the open sky, tossing the ball back and forth, talking about life and loss, dreams and regrets, but also about forgiveness and the future. As darkness crept in, we sat on the bleachers, watching the fireflies flicker across the outfield. "You know, Dad," Ethan said, voice thoughtful, "I always thought being a man meant never showing weakness, never asking for help. But you showed me that real strength is in loving people, in admitting when you're wrong, in standing by your family when it's hardest." I nodded, the years of struggle finally making sense. "That's the only kind of legacy that matters, son. Not the money, not the trophies, just the love we leave behind." He was quiet for a moment, then looked at me, determination in his eyes. "I want to do better. For you, for Mom, for myself. Maybe someday, when I have a son, I'll remember this, and do it right. I smiled, placing my hand on his. You're already doing it, Ethan. Just keep showing up. That's all I ever wanted. We watched the stars come out, silent and at peace. In that stillness, I felt Linda's presence, gentle, forgiving, proud of the family she helped create. Months passed. Ethan's business didn't turn around overnight, but he kept his word. He called often, visited every week, and never asked for money again. Instead, he asked for advice, for company, for time. He showed up at Sunday dinners, mowed my lawn when my back hurt, even started coaching Little League with me in the spring. People in town stopped me to say, "Coach, it's good to see you with your boy again." And I'd smile, feeling the quiet pride of a man whose story, though filled with hardship, ended the way it should, with forgiveness, with love, with hope. One evening, Ethan and I sat on the porch, sipping lemonade, watching kids ride bikes in the twilight. "Dad," he said, "thank you for waiting for me to grow up. For loving me when I didn't deserve it." I squeezed his shoulder, voice thick with feeling. "That's what fathers do, son. We wait. We believe. And when our kids come home, we welcome them with open arms." He nodded, quiet, watching the sun disappear behind the trees. Life wasn't perfect. The world kept spinning, bills still came due, grief still visited on quiet nights. But the walls between us were gone, replaced by a bridge we'd built together, one apology, one game of catch, one hard conversation at a time. As the years rolled by, I watched Ethan become the man I'd always hoped he'd be. Not because he was successful or wealthy, but because he'd learned the value of humility, forgiveness, and family. And in the end, that's all any father can ask.